Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. My name is Moria. I'm the Reactor Program Manager based in Tel Aviv, Israel. I'm super excited to be here today and moderate this session on sharing best practices on building effective work-life balance. This event is part of a series we launched in honor of the International Women's Day. We would love to hear you and make this session interactive as possible. So please feel free to post your question during the session and we will take the time to answer those questions at the end. I'm also going to share a link with you for a survey that we conduct for this event. I appreciate if you can dedicate a minute or two to fill in the survey and share your feedback with us. Okay, so I'm excited to introduce our panelists for today who will be sharing their best practices on building effective work-life balance. So we have Adi Morbiran, Go-to-Market Lead at Microsoft, Seema Irani, Partner Channel Communication Lead at Microsoft, and Nitya Narasimhan, Cloud Advocate at Microsoft. Before we start the discussion, let's take a minute or two to get to know our panelists, what their current role and their career journey. So Seema, we'll start with you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Moria. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much. Really excited to be here, by the way. So let me just share a bit about my journey. So my name is Seema Irani. I was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan, and then life carried me off to US, where my family migrated. I did my undergrad from the University of Texas at Dallas, and right after that, got married, came back to this part of the world. I am based in Dubai currently. I am a mother of two beautiful boys, 21 and 16. And while I thought communications was a transferable skill, I was working for a company, a science company called DuPont, and for the longest time. And then I saw this great opportunity up at Microsoft, and I was like, great, let's just join that. So currently, as you see, I am the Partner Comms Channel Manager, and then I'm also the Area Change Lead. While I said that comms was transferable, clearly it wasn't. Tech world has a whole new meaning, a whole new language, and I'm just like, whoa, what just happened there? I do have to say I'm super passionate about D&I. I'm a strong advocate for mental health. And if there's one thing that I would love to ditch is the notion around boys don't cry. So when I became a mom, I was on a mission. So that's been my journey, personal and of course my professional life. And thank you for having me once again.
Adi?
Sure. Yeah, I was kind of taken by Seema's story. I'm getting to learn to know you live. So hello, everyone. Really excited to be on this session today with everyone listening. My name is Adi Morbiran. And like most women, I'm a multitasker and I carry many hats. My day job at Microsoft is ISV GTM lead, which is basically a lot of acronyms, but it means that I do co-marketing activities with our software marketing partners. So I'm a marketeer. So that's my day job. My passion job is that I lead the diversity ERG group at Microsoft Israel. That means that I lead all of the initiatives in Microsoft Israel to empower people with disabilities. One of the reasons I'm very passionate about that is because I'm a mother of two sons, just like Seema, a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old boy. And my 13-year-old son, Daniel, is on the autistic spectrum. So my passion for empowering people with disabilities is actually comes from the heart. In terms of my career journey, I've been in the high-tech industry for a little bit over 20 years, which is dating myself. But I've carried a lot of different roles in different disciplines. I started as a software programmer, moved into sales, professional services, strategy and planning, and finally landed, I think, where I belong, which is in marketing. Aside from that, I'm also a spoken word poet. So I perform with my poetry. And I love seeing how everything comes together in my life, having starting my work at Microsoft, where I have both my advocacy work with the disabilities, my marketing work, and even my poetry comes into play in my work at Microsoft. So happy to be here.
Cool. Should I go next?
Thank you. Yes, sure. Go ahead, Nitya.
Awesome. So, hi everyone. My name is Nitya Narasimhan. I'm actually based in New York. I'm an American of Indian origin. So, kind of like I grew up loving everything about my culture. When I was really young, I actually moved to Africa. My dad was working there. So, I was really grateful because I got to experience life outside the bubble I would have normally grown up in. Background wise, I'm currently a mobile developer advocate. We call it cloud advocate in the developer relations team at Microsoft. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that means in just a minute. But my journey, and I'm really incredibly proud to be on this stage with these women because just listening to them, I'm like, you know what? We all have shared stories. We're all working moms, number one, right? So I have a 12-year-old.
Totally.
And I'll tell you the saddest story of my life is at the age of 12, he's now as tall as me. So I don't think I can ever kind of assert myself over him again. This is really sad. But that is actually the reason I do a lot of what I do. I think we owe it to the next generation to have their lives be better than the way we had it, right? And I think we are at the right moment in our culture, in our times where things we do, things we say, things we actually express will have an impact. So my journey into tech, I've actually been in tech, I think, from day one. I did an undergrad degree in electronics and communication engineering. My claim to fame is I was employee 52 at Infosys. If you know Infosys, you know what that means. But my mom told me that company will never go anywhere. So please go do a PhD. So that's what I did. I left them. Thanks, Mom. But I actually took a PhD in computer engineering, did stuff in fault tolerance, joined Motorola Research. I spent a decade there, becoming a distinguished member of technical staff. And then I discovered community because I was a remote worker for the last few years of that time. And I kind of never looked back. The reason I'm in developer relations is because it's a means for us to help the community, to empower the next generation of developers, to learn about the technologies and actually use them in ways that make sense in their current daily existence. And so that's where I'm at. I'm very passionate about mobile. And last but not least, if you see the picture on the screen, that's the other thing I'm passionate about. What I really loved about the fact that, or my current role, is they let us bring our whole selves to work. I love sketchnoting. I'm not an artist. I really just like doodling and writing things down. And so if you're interested in this work, look at Sketch the Docs. I try to visualize tech for you in a way that makes sense. Cool, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitya. And we will see more of this amazing picture that Nitya took soon. I just wanted to say if you can just mute yourself when we are not speaking, because I got some feedback that we have some echo in the background and some people struggle to hear. So that's it for now. And let's start with the session. And again, I just remind you, please feel free to ask your questions in the comment tab, and we will take the time to answer your questions at the end and at the end of the discussion. So first, I wanted to ask Nitya, how would you describe in one sentence your work-life balance situation nowadays?
This is a good one, right? I actually use the word triage. When I was graduating, someone who came, the commencement speaker, made this analogy to work-life balance is about juggling balls. And there are some glass balls, there are some rubber balls, and some metal balls. And I never felt that as much as I feel now. So it's triage because we are juggling all these things in the air. And there are certain things made of glass that you cannot drop, because when they drop, they will shatter. The rubber balls you can drop, they will bounce back, buy yourself time. So there are tasks that are going to be flexible that you can kind of drop. Metal, let it fall. It will not get hurt. And those are the things you want to look for, that if I had time, I would do it, right? So that analogy has been super helpful to me. So to me, the word I think about is triage. It's constantly evaluating the priorities, what's glass, what's metal, what's rubber, keeping the glass ball in the air at all times, dropping the metal, and juggling the rubber.
Oh, sorry, Seema, you're on mute. Sorry.
Apologies. Just wanted to chime in there. So spot on. I mean, honestly, I think when we were hit by COVID, the first few months, I was like, what's just going here, right? Because you're like at home, so you're expected to be doing everything, all right? You're supposed to be in the kitchen, you're supposed to be with the kids because they're home as well, right? So clearly, I think to me, it was, if there's one word, that's been a struggle. It's just so hard to kind of strike a balance. And when you would be just getting up every day and just going to work physically, that, all right, when you come home, you'll tackle it all. But then I guess when we just at home, it was just hard to kind of disconnect. And so again, I think work has been constant, and because the laptop's all around us, right? So it's just really hard to kind of let go. So there's this constant thing that you kind of, and if you don't answer your emails, or if you're not on top of things, there's a lot of guilt that kind of comes in as well. So it's like, all right, got to deal with the guilt. And then of course you have guilt around your kids being home. And of course they are reaching out to you a lot more than if you're not at home. So I think striking a balance was really, really hard. But hey, I think by now, I think we are all finding our pockets to kind of save our sanity and just surviving, really. So yeah, it's been a fun ride coping up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting listening to both of you speak, because it's amazing how similar our experiences are, no matter where you're from. You know, in the US and Dubai, I'm based in Israel, and it seems like we've all been living through the same things. For me, I think my sentence would be making this new normal, which is like the new coined phrase, work for me. And I think it was a big surprise to me, because when initially it became clear that we were going to be working from home, I thought, hey, piece of cake. This makes my life easier. No commute, 5 steps between my kid's bedroom and the office. I mean, it makes balance a lot easier. And what I found is that it was actually the other way around. It made balance a lot harder, because in the past, if we had to, like, if I take Nitya's description, juggle the balls, by putting one aside at the end of the workday and going home, and juggle the time of when you switch between one and the other. Now we have to do everything simultaneously. And I think that was a surprise to me, is that what the difficulty of doing everything simultaneously, and the skills needed to reach that balance really changed. And so I think eventually, at the beginning, it was really hard. As time went by, just like Seema described, we learned how to make it work for us. My kids learned to respect my work time. Putting up a chair against the door was, one thing that helped, from them barging in. I started understanding that I need to block times off my calendar. Lunch became sacred, lunch with my family. And that also relieved a little bit of that guilt that we were talking about. And slowly, I think that we made it work. And I think now, at least in Israel, we're starting to go back to some kind of normalcy. In fact, next week, we're going to what we call stage 5, which means we're going back to the office, which is amazing. But, Microsoft said that we're moving to a hybrid work model, which means we'll be able to decide and choose whether you want to stay home or go to work. Now, going back to what I said at the beginning, at first I thought staying home was going to be perfect. Then I thought, oh my gosh, this is hard. As soon as we can go back to the office, I'm just going to be at the office all the time. Now I think the right answer is somewhere in the middle. And being able to choose when I'll work from home and when I'll work from the office, I think is going to help make that work-life balance a lot more doable for me. So I think it's been a learning curve. But I'm now happy to say I'm all into this new normal.
Can I just say something here? Can't agree more, right? So today I had to go to the office and it just felt strange. Really, it's like, all right, what is this? Meeting people is like feeling bizarre and strange. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So we have to unlearn what we've learned. And so it's like all scrambled up. But yeah, I think hybrid is the way to go. Bingo.
Well, absolutely.
What I took away from hers is go get a chair. That was a good tip to keep I have to buy a chair. Thank you.
Well, lead me to my next question. I mean, would you say then, not just in COVID days, but is work-life balance an illusion? What does it actually mean?
So I think I'll take that one, because I've thought about this a lot. What is it? When they say work-life balance, what does it mean? And I think I've found that it's actually a state of mind. It's not something practical of how many hours you spend with each. It's not something practical in terms of how you manage your priorities or your task list. It's like a switch in your mind of reaching that balance. And it's being able to let go of wanting to be perfect everywhere. And I think once you let go of that, I'm a perfectionist, yeah, but letting go of trying to be perfect everywhere all the time, and understanding that in some cases you'll have to sacrifice one area for the other, and that's okay. and it's okay not to be perfect at home when you're all into work, and it's okay not to be the perfect employee when you have things going on at home. When you reach that state of mind, when you can do that and feel okay and not feel guilty about it, then I think you've reached work-life balance. And that is regardless of how you manage your time or how you manage your tasks. So for me, it's not an illusion, it's a state of mind. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love analogies, right? So I like the idea of like, this is a state of mind. It's something you have to get into. I kind of think of it as a lens for me, to the point that, as more stuff falls on our heads, I actually think of it, and the state of mind describes this perfectly, because I think we need to have two sides to our mind. One of them is like constantly trying to prioritize what you're doing in the time you have. And the other, which was, I think, was it Seema Saradi's word? I forget, but it really struck me, which is self-compassion, right? I think the one thing we have to really, really work hard on is the guilt and forgiving ourselves for dropping things. Because there is no way we can do it all. We are all like, and this is very, very true of almost every woman I know. We are perfectionists. We are multitaskers. We think we can do it all. And then when things we don't go as planned, we kind of think to ourselves, where did I fail? Like, why are all these Instagram perfect people in the world? And why am I looking like this, right? And the reality is that everyone is struggling. They just kind of choose not to share it. So nowadays I've kind of embraced this notion of fearlessness, right? It is what it is. You've got to kind of have compassion for yourself. And to the kind of the juggling thing, right? Prioritization. Look at everything through a lens of, is this my priority? And if it fails, and if I drop it, that's okay. I can move on and do something else. And I think that has helped a great deal.
No, I can't agree more with the two of you, by the way. So one thing, we all are OCDs. I just feel like, all right, we just have to be the best wife and the best mom and the best daughter-in-law and the sister-in-law and just the whole 9 yards, literally. But going back to the question, I think if there are two things I always, it's like I rack my mind. It's all about prioritization. And at the end of the day, I think we make the choices. Nobody can really kind of make that choice for us. I think it's really onto us. And to own that, right? That we've made that choice for that hour to go to somebody versus something else. So yeah, I think sometimes it could be an illusion while it's all about mindset, as Adi said.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is there a difference in how we deal with or how we feel about work-life balance as women versus men, in your opinion? And if so, what is it? What do you think?
So let me take that, since we were talking about, I guess, the boys and all of that.
Yeah.
This one, honestly, I wish I could say a yes, but I don't know how deep-rooted the societal cultures are. Maybe it's just mine, to be honest. But I just feel like we were born and we were like told that you have to be the nurturer, the homemaker. Like I said, it's like just all those roles that we just have to ace, right? And if you think about men, they just really have to be the bread earner. And so I, by the way, to date, have never heard my husband say the word guilt. And if there's one thing that I live and kind of die with, it's all about guilt. If I don't do my work, if I don't cook for my son, I mean, it's just horrid, right? And so I wish there could be a better balance. Although I do know that things are shifting. I do see men a lot more now kind of doing the chores and kind of helping the women and the wives and the family. Absolutely so. But I do think that, yeah, they do have a long way to go, for sure.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And I agree that things are changing. But it goes back, I think, again, to mindset and, like you say, cultural expectations. It used to be home is on us, the woman. Kids are on us, the woman. And you do see that a little bit changing, which is great. And I have to say, though, that it's changing on the surface, but I think something deep hasn't changed. So I'll just give you my example. I'm divorced. And I'm in a great relationship with my ex-husband, and we share custody of our children. So I'm actually living the perfect example of shared responsibility. Half of the time, the kids are at his house. Everything that concerning their raising, their funds, the time spent with them is shared exactly 50-50. So you would say that for me, it's the same. There's no difference between men and women in our family because it's shared custody and we share the time and the costs and everything else. But even so, even in this, very ideal model of 50-50, it's not 50-50 because the guilt remains. Because for me, the deep rooted expectations, even when the kids are at their father's, if something's wrong, I feel responsible. If they need something, I want to go be them with them. If they need to prepare something for school, even if it's his day, I'll go run fetch it for them. So I think even though the reality might be different and it might be more equal, the feeling, the sensation, the guilt, the responsibility still has not changed. That's very deep rooted. And when I prepared for this chat, I thought I would say, sadly, that's the situation. But now that I'm saying it, I don't think sadly. I don't think it's sad that I feel responsible, that I feel guilty, that I feel this connection and ownership. I think it is what it is. I'm not sad about it.
Yeah, I actually, this is, I think the thread I've heard with all of ours is it's a cultural thing, right? It's so deep rooted in culture that people take that for granted. And I'll just offer a couple of things. One is, this is my experience. The fact that now my husband and my son and I are all at home, like for a year, we've been working from home, means that both of them are suddenly aware of how much work gets done around the house, right? And that has been like such a win. Now it's like, oh, okay, we all need to pull our weight. And I will actually say that as women, I see two responsibilities for us. One is we can't help being nurturers. That's who we are. So we should raise our kids differently. Like I make sure my son, I literally have a recipes for AJ tag on AJ is my son. That's a tag on Twitter where I post photos with recipes because I'm like, you're going to learn to cook. And if you ever forget, I'm like literally creating a history of links for you. Learn to cook, start doing stuff. And then the other thing is there's this incredible book in India. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's called Chup. Chup says, shh. That's what in Hindi means like chup, right? And if you read it, there's this one line that I read that stuck with me. It says, women are trained to erase themselves. That shook me. It was like, we are from birth told, sit quietly in a corner, don't speak till you're spoken to, go help your brother, serve your dad, be respectful to your elders. We are taught to erase ourselves. And one of the biggest things I've had to work on in my past 20 years or so is consciously to undo that culture, right? And so I kind of make this notion of like, there are three things in our lives. There's culture, there's nurture, and there's venture. Culture is how you're born. Nurture is what you're taught. Venture, that's the only thing you have control over. It's how you go out, learn the things, unlearn, relearn, do whatever. So we've all got to teach ourselves to unlearn that cultural thing, and we got to teach our kids to be better.
Absolutely. So by the way, I do have a question for the two of you, since we are like, suppose if your child, God forbid, is unwell, who will drop the work and then take them to the hospital, or God forbid, right? I think that sometimes is something that I question. It's 90% of the time, honestly, it's myself, but I'm curious about the two of you. When that happens,
so I'll answer that because I have a story. Yeah, I have a story around that actually, because like I shared with you earlier, I am divorced. And so by law, the agreement that we signed says that if our son is ill or one of our sons is ill on my day, it's my responsibility to drop everything and go. And if it happens on his day, it's his responsibility to drop everything and go. And what happened is I had to respect that. And things happen, and my son was ill on his day, and his dad did drop everything and go. And I felt awful. I mean, I couldn't stop crying at the thought that my son is ill and it's not me rushing to his side, even though his father is amazing. He's an amazing dad. He did, taking care of him just as well as I did. But the fact that it's not me rushing over just didn't feel right with me. So as the years went by, we've already been divorced 8 years. So as the years have gone by, it just became a thing where I go regardless of whose day it is. And I think that goes back to, it doesn't matter what we decide. We're nurturers. And in my heart, it has to be me that rushes over.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll kind of agree with that. I'm very lucky. I actually genuinely think so. My husband is like a wonderful equal partner. I worked on him for 20 years, so I take credit. No, I'm kidding. But the reason I'm saying that is we both kind of studied. We had our only son very late in life, so we were determined that we wouldn't repeat mistakes that we felt had happened to us. But I will make a small succinct difference. I think in this case, the thing of who will take him to the doctor, that I think there was a nice sea change. Until the age of 10, it was always me. After the age of 10, it's almost him. And that's because of the kid, right? Till he was 10, he wants mom. Like, mom, don't let the doctor do this. Now it's like, me and dad, we're going to walk in there together. Yeah, whatever, dude, go do that. But I think the bigger challenge is like school. I think that's the comparable thing. Like when there's a teacher's day and they want a parent to go up to kind of
what happens?
Who goes, that would be me every time. He just refuses. He's like, there's no way I'm going to go hand out cookies. So I think it's a contextual thing, but I think the bigger shift is equal parenting. Like the most important thing for me is I trust that if I drop the ball, he will pick it up. And he trusts that if I drop it, if he drops it, I will. And I think that works. But yeah, we're still working on.
Nitya, I have to say, I beat you by 10. So you are 20 years of marriage. I'm 30.
Whoa! Go!
I have to say, I absolutely give it to my husband as well. A super dad, I have to say. I know, seriously, right, Adi? I'm like, all right. But, spot on. All these years, all right, when they were young, it was always me. And now when he takes them, I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know if I even like it anymore. It's like, I should be the one doing that. Again, the guilt piece.
Well, all I want to know is I want your beauty secrets. If you can look like this after 30 years of marriage and like you're smiling, I'm like, tell me.
Come on.
I'm like,
good marriage.
We'll talk. I'm like,
So,
whoa, that's a question.
whose responsibility is it to solve the work-life balance challenge? What's the role of the organizations, of us as an individual? Nitya.
I'll take this one. So first of all, I am super grateful that I'm working at Microsoft right now. That I will say. I think that the pandemic especially has shown me the huge value of organizational push on work-life balance versus each person having to go upwards, like, bottom up to ask for time. And so I'm going to talk about it in two different ways. I personally think the responsibility should always start with the organization for a very simple reason. When you have things like pandemics, when you have work-life balance that has to be like, taken at a large scale level, someone like an organization saying this is the policy gives everybody freedom to kind of like do it the way that means the best thing for them without being judged. On the flip side, when you come up individually, you're like I have to take charge of my work-life balance. You're constantly struggling with two things, right? One is, oh my God, my colleagues are not doing this. How are they kind of thinking of it? Are they judging me for taking time off for caregiving? And I've seen this, like, let's be honest, right? You might have heard stories that are like, even within our teams, we have like folks who are parents, folks who are single saying, I don't have kids. Why are you getting extra time or extra benefits, right? These challenges happen. So an organization saying, hey, all of us have this at our disposal gives us kind of the liberty to figure out how we want to do it. That said, I think we have individual accountability to enforce those things in our daily lives. I am the worst offender that way. If you have time off, you should take it, right? Like, we're all workaholics and we need to break ourselves of the habit. And to me, I think the individual responsibility is to be an example to others, right? So that when someone at an organization level says you have this policy, we are not taking it for granted and saying, we don't need that. We absolutely need it. So I would say it has to start with an organization. It has to be upheld by the individual.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I'll first say that I'm so thankful to be working at Microsoft too, because when you talk about this policy that comes from above, we're lucky to work in an organization where that policy exists to begin with, and it's a good one to, as a second, because I know examples of friends that work in other industries that if there's a policy, it's not necessarily as good as we have it. So I think there is a responsibility for the organization. It's a cultural, I mean, the organization is responsible for policy and for culture. And I think from a cultural perspective, it's up to them to make sure that there is respect for work-life balance. But I think it doesn't work if we don't uphold it, like you said. But one thing that I think is very crucial to understand is that work-life balance is very different for each of us. So for me, it might mean working nights instead of working days. For somebody else, it might mean making sure that everything's shut off over the weekend because they need 2 days to decompress. And for somebody else is, I don't know, taking 10 days off every hour. So it practically means a different thing for each one of us. And therefore, I think it's up to us to ensure that we make it work for us. Like I said at the beginning, making the process works for us. And I think it's the difficulty is having the courage to say, this is what I need, and having the courage to say no when somebody asks you to do it otherwise. So I would actually switch the order. I think it's first on us to decide what is the work-life balance that we need and have the courage to request it and to enforce it and to make sure that we follow it. And then the responsibility of the organization to have a culture that allows us to ask for it and do it and allows that courage to actually take place. So both, but I think vice versa.
So true. Just want to chime in there. So can't agree more. Blessed to be here, to be honest. And if you think about even within our team, even with the manager and like everyone, I think they're just super supportive. I find that super odd sometimes when my manager would be like, you need to take some time off. You haven't taken time off for like months now, you know, and I just find that very comforting, even though I don't want to, but just hearing from him, I think just means a lot, right? And it just allows us to kind of, you know, just kind of, yeah, just feels lighter. And there's no guilt around, you know, oh, all right, if I'm not there, how is he gonna think, or all of that, right? So I guess, yeah, I think the culture piece.
And I want to say one more
true.
thing. That as a mother of a special needs child, I think the challenge of work-life balance is even more difficult sometimes, because I'll find that many times I need to be called away because something happened in school, or there's a certain challenge, or he's having a tantrum, and I have to leave everything and go. And I found that probably the most important tool that I use to make sure that I get that respect or empathy for my situation is authenticity. And I think that's also the word that I had on Nitya's sketch, because by being very authentic and open with my managers, with my colleagues, with the partners that I work with about my situation, it makes the environment adapt themselves to my needs. So I think it's, you know, my example is just, you know, a unique one because of my son's situation. But even without that unique story, if we were all very authentic and open about our needs, our home situation, our challenges, then I think it would be easier for us to ask for adaptations in our work-life balance, because people understand where we're coming from. And it will also be easier for people to be more empathetic and provide a culture that supports it, because there's a context. So I'm a big encourager of authenticity and openness in the workplace.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I will actually say Adi has influenced me a little bit in how I'm going to think about this, because I do think you're right about two things. One is I really love the example you give us, special needs child. And what I mean by that is that work-life balance doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. We need people to speak up, to actually influence the policies at the top, right? Like what comes down needs to be influenced by what people really need, not by what someone thinks they need. And I think that is an extremely important point we shouldn't miss out. So we should all speak up about what works for us. And then the other side of it, from even the individual, the thing that I think I kind of fail to account for, which I personally have appreciated, is if you are in a leadership position, what you do as an individual has huge impact on the company. I, for instance, really love the fact that my skip level manager will literally be like, I'm taking this day off because I need to recover. And that subtly gives all of us kind of like, you know, hey, this is okay.
Permission.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's like that kind of this, hey, okay, it's coming from the top, but it's like at an individual. I think those are really, really important things to keep in mind. Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, so my next question is, what are your top 3 tips? So what have you done that we can apply to our own lives?
This one is an interesting one, right? I'm excited to hear from Adi and from Nitya as well. But to be honest, I think when we started this unprecedented time, like I said, initially it was all like almost like a smoothie. Everything was like all over the place. And then it was like, all right, we really need to kind of fix this, right? Because you need to save your sanity. A couple of things that at least I did. Number one, I blocked time on my calendar, literally, for my lunch break. So I know when my son would be getting home. Well, he wasn't going anywhere, but even virtually when he was online studying. So that lunch hour was blocked. So even if anybody's trying to kind of share any meeting request, that time was blocked. So completely off, right? So and since it was blocked, I think there was no guilt, because it was like, all right, it's nobody can kind of say that, all right, where are you kind of thing. So thank God for that. The second piece, I think the most important one, and Nitya kind of touched on that earlier. This year for me, for 2021, it's all about self-compassion. I think we are just way too hard on ourselves, like just brutal for anything, to be honest. I mean, if I have a bad presentation or if I just have a bad day at work, I completely beat myself up. It's like, oh my gosh, as though like world's going to fall apart. But no, I mean, honestly, it's just going to be one more thing. You get to learn, right? I mean, when mistakes happen, I take them as an opportunity. But at the same time, I just feel like, yeah, I think that there's just a lot of guilt. Again, going back to the culture, I think it's just deep rooted for just not being the best of the role that we play, right? So to me, I think I really, really want to kind of intentionally practice self-compassion. And last but not the least, I think the most important thing for me is weekends. So just like what we heard, when our leaders or when our managers kind of they just unplug, to me, that allowed me and gives me the permission to do the same. So I literally, by the way, Thursday night by 1 o'clock, 1 a.m., I just make sure I turn off notification on my Teams and my Outlook. So straight 48 hours. Of course, when you have big events going on or anything massive, obviously they stay on. But honestly, that was a conscious effort that I had to make, because otherwise you see something pop up and boom, I have to answer now. Boom, your mind just goes all over the place. And then you're not present in the moment. So even if I'm having a family lunch over the weekend, I'm still thinking, oh my God, that email, I didn't kind of reply, or that was expected. But if you don't have that popping on your phone, I think life can be a lot easier. So yeah, I think that's been my biggest takeaway and brings in some sanity for sure.
So I'll add to that as well. So one of my things is I kind of, you probably notice I love metaphors and I love visualizations, right? So to me, what I realized, and I think I'm hearing this in both of yours as well, is at the core, work-life balance is a time management problem, right? Like prioritizing what you're doing with the limited time. Time is the one resource nobody can give you more of. It is what it is, right? And so I kind of looked at it from 3 perspectives. First is journaling. Journaling is something I really love. I don't do it like as systematically as I should. But what I mean by that is something that creates a real awareness in you of how you are spending your time. So one little thing I'm doing is, I'm not kidding. Here, you can see I have a little kitchen timer. Like this is a penguin sitting on my desk. And what I do is I kind of set it up like it's like a Pomodoro timer, right? 25 minutes of work and then 5 minutes you have to take a break and just walk around. You can't see it, but I even have weights in the back over there. Maybe you can. It's so sitting over there. And it's like, you got to find time. How do you create awareness of what you're doing with time, right? Whatever you can do. It could be time boxing on your calendar. It could be having Pomodoro timers, whatever. Journaling is about creating this clear awareness in your head of what did you spend your time on, right? And then once you know that, how do you justify it? And this guilt, this is a great, great word that I think we all are not giving enough importance to. Guilt drives us. And the way I'm trying to justify it is guilt. I should think about opportunity cost. For every time someone asks me to do something, I've actually done a bunch of self-care talks. And this is the example I give. When you come to me and say, I'm going to put 45 minutes on your calendar because I want you to do X or I want you to come for Y, what is the opportunity cost? What other thing could I have done that might have given me more value? And if you pick the one thing that means more to you and compare it, Your prioritization will become clearer. In my case, it's my son. If you set me a meeting at 7 o'clock, my opportunity cost is I don't get to spend an hour making lunch and talking to him about his day. Is your assignment worth that? And most times it may not be, and I'm not going to compromise, right? And that leads me to the third part, which is if you're aware of what you're doing, you know the opportunity cost of your time, but you still have things where, hey, you got to do it because you're being paid for it. And it's critical. How do you do that? Lara Hogan had this great talk she gave, which was learn to negotiate. And that's because what we often fail to understand is when we sit at a table, they're all humans. In our minds, you're my manager and I'm your employee. But in everyone's minds, they're all human, right? They're like looking at me going, I'm saying on a Saturday, what's your problem, right? So the learning to negotiate was about looking at what your needs are, looking at what the needs of them from a human perspective are, and finding kind of like ways to balance. It's like saying, hey, I understand. How about we trade this off? So I can do this for you that day and give you time to spend on what you want, and I'll do this. And I'll leave you with one last thought, which is my other analogy. I call it a packing analogy. And it's like your brains only have so much space. So think of it as carry-on luggage. When your brain is carry-on luggage, right? As long as all the work you need to do and all the problems people throw at you fits in there, you can carry it on the plane with no extra charge. If you start taking on other people's problems, you have to pop the expanders on your brain like luggage and start filling it in. You're paying $50 to check it in. You better damn well make sure they give you the $50, right? So my notion of this is we need to really be aware that everything we do has a cost. And if you can surface the cost in a way that makes you aware, you're less likely to do it for free. And that was my thing.
I almost want to finish with Nitya's piece because it's so good and it's so methodical and it's so well worded that I don't want to add on top of it. But I'm going to add my 3 cents as well. And I will also share with you that I have 3 bullets that I wrote down, but I'm not going to use them because I changed them as you guys spoke. First, I want to say, Seema, that I'm taking your tip on the notifications. Because one of my biggest challenges is I'm based in Israel. Our weekend is Friday and Saturday, and I work with the US, and the weekend there is Saturday and Sunday. And what happens a lot of times is on that Friday, where it's a work day over there, I will get notifications and emails constantly. And it's not my work day, but I feel compelled to have to address that. And I'm taking your lead on that, and I'm turning on notifications, and I'll be respecting my weekends work moving forward. And I'm going to take one of your analogies, Nitya, in my tips. So 3 tips on my side. The first one is something that I said before, which is authenticity. I think being authentic about your needs, about your situation, sets up the stage for better work-life balance and makes you proceed in the world with less guilt and with less of a gap between who you really are and what you really need and how you behave. And I felt that when I made a conscious decision, this is a decision I made in my midlife crisis a couple of years ago, that I'm going to be my full authentic self at my workplace, even if that means crying, even if that means asking for help. And I felt that I still feel every day that creates a much better workspace for work-life balance for me. So just be authentic, and like you said, we're all human beings. So that creates connection, it creates compassion, it creates empathy, and it doesn't make you less professional. So that's my first tip. My second tip is do something you love. And doing something you love opens up those expanders. So if you have a very tight luggage, but now you're doing something you love, your luggage becomes bigger. You're able to do more stuff if you're doing something you love. And that could mean something outside of work, like I do my poetry, and that just opens up my life and, gives me a breath of fresh air. Or it means do something you love in your job. And sometimes your job may not all be something you love, but if you find a way to interject things that you love into your job, then it creates more space within your job. So for me, it's public speaking, it's being on stage. It's not part of my official role, but I made it part of my role, and then that creates more time for me because I'm doing something I love. It's not as hard, I think. So that's the second thing, is do something you love. And the third thing, I think, goes back to the examples that you both gave of when your manager gives you an example, you feel better. I think be an example and be the voice of encouragement for other women. I mean, I can't tell you how much of an impact that it has on me when either my manager or a peer or a colleague or somebody at my office says a good word, encourages me when they feel that I'm having a challenge, asks me if I need help, even if I haven't asked for it. It's such a source of strength for me, and it's such a learning to do the same for others. And they say that we're egotistical creatures, and it's true. So when we give to others, it's actually for ourselves, because makes us feel better. But it creates an environment where work-life balance is easier to achieve when you encourage others. So those are my 3 tips.
Thank you so much. That's really great. You gave some really great examples, and we are getting great feedback from people say that they completely relate to what all of you are sharing. So I mean, we don't have time for additional questions, but before we end, I really want to share the sketch from Nitya once again, because it's just amazing. So I saw you shared it also, Adi. So we'll see if we can share it also on our event page. But I love that. That's cool. Really cool. So before we end, I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's morning or it's late in the day for some of you. So thank you for joining us. And also thank you for our panelists, of course. As I mentioned, this event is part of our event series, and I shared the link with you. So we have additional events happening this week. If you want to join other events as well, this event was recorded and it will be available on demand on our YouTube channel. I also shared the link for that. And that's it for me. So thank you so much. Thank you, Seema. Thank you, Adi. Thank you, Nitya. And bye, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Good morning.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Goodbye, everyone.